Badass of the Week is an iHeartRadio podcast produced by High Five Content. January 1840. Anita Garibaldi, soldier, freedom fighter, separatist, guerrilla leader, is riding hard. Wounded in battle during the fighting at Curitibanos, she was captured by the enemy, but has managed to escape her captors, steal a horse, and take off into the night, galloping away as Imperial troops fire at her with their muskets. She hurtles through unfamiliar forest in the dark of night, yet does not slow her pace. She is 19 years old, in the early stages of pregnancy. She received word that her lover, guerrilla leader Giuseppe Garibaldi, was killed in action, yet she refuses to believe it. She didn't see his body among the piles of dead on the field. He must be alive. And if he lives, so too does the resistance. More shots ring out. A group of Imperial horsemen are pursuing her, determined to bring the rebel leader back, dead or alive. One of their bullets hits home, striking Anita Garibaldi's horse. It cries out and collapses, pitching her forward into the mud. She scrambles to her feet, pulling herself from under the wounded animal. The enemy horsemen are closing in quickly. She runs. And then she hears the sound of running water. It's a large river, ahead in the darkness. It's moving quickly in an unknown direction, with rocks jutting up above the surface. The horsemen get closer. It's now or never. Anita Garibaldi dives into the water. Hello, and welcome back to Badass of the Week. My name is Ben Thompson, and I am here, as always, with my co-host, Dr. Pat Larish. Pat, thanks for coming back. You still here?
Yep.
How are you doing?
Doing okay. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I just completed a really big project, so I'm finally getting a little bit of free time, which is really nice.
Awesome.
I've got one more little thing, and then I'm kind of in the clear, and that's going to feel pretty good. I'm going to take tomorrow off to celebrate. That's my exciting thing for the week. Take Friday off, go to a hockey game.
Nice. Yeah.
We have been doing this show for a while, and I had mentioned to you that I really wanted to do a Brazilian badass because, I spend a lot of time down there, and I have been getting a lot of exposure to Brazilian history. My wife's cousin Gustavo has kind of, he's been my liaison for badass Brazilian history. He's done a very good job of sending me all manner of badass things from Brazilian history, old movies, books, stuff like that.
Awesome.
And there's a lot of really cool stuff there. Yeah. So I'd been wanting to do a Brazilian for the show, and you kind of had an idea when I said that.
Yeah. So we're talking about Brazilian badasses, but the spark for my suggestion was actually in Rome, as in Rome, Italy. So one of the times I was in Rome, I was walking around on the Gianicolo Hill, which is one of the many hills of Rome. I see this statue of a woman on a horse, and the horse is rearing up, and it's very dramatic. It's very well sculpted. And one arm is raised wielding a pistol, and her other arm is clasping her infant child to her chest. Who is this? Well, I look closer, and it's Anita Garibaldi. And there are friezes around the pedestal, little sculptural elements telling various episodes of her life. And she's buried in Rome, but she was a freedom fighter in Brazil. And her story is just fascinating on a personal level, on a political level. The statue is actually pretty inspiring. It's pretty dynamic. It was appropriated as fascist propaganda, but lots of things were, so we're not going to worry about that too much. So I wanted to learn more about her. And when you suggested a Brazilian badass, this seemed like a great opportunity.
Yeah. And so she's a huge hero in Brazil, especially in the south, in the southern part of the country, which is actually where my family's from. Gustavo is from the same state as her, and my in-laws live a couple states north. So she's a big hero. There's streets and plazas and universities, and there's even a couple cities named after her. There's all kinds of patriotic Brazilian art of her doing things like riding on horses and shooting guns and holding flags, stuff like that.
Yeah. And in Italy, you have a lot of things named after Garibaldi, but those tend to be named after Giuseppe Garibaldi, who is her husband.
Right. He's like the greatest hero of all of modern Italian history, right?
Yeah, he led the reunification.
Right. But she was there for a lot of that.
Yeah.
Which is worth mentioning, right? Because she wasn't there for all of it, but she's there for a lot of it.
Yeah, and it's nice to hear that she's getting credit for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's get into the story and let's find out who this woman on the horse with the gun and the baby is. We're going to talk about Anita Garibaldi. But first, we're going to take a really short commercial break for a word from our sponsors. Stay with us, and we will get into that story when we get back. I am not afraid of living, of running after my dreams. I am only afraid of standing still. We are going to talk now about Anita Garibaldi.
That sounds like a motivational quote right there.
Yeah, it is in certain parts of Brazil.
I'm sure. Yeah, like do you get it on like posters or coffee mugs or?
Yeah, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the one statue of her in Rome, but there's one per like square mile in Brazil.
Fair, yeah.
At least, like I said, at least in the South, because that's kind of where she was a hero. So, Pat, I'm gonna assume limited understanding of Brazilian geography and history as I go through this, and so I will kind of explain the backstory a little bit, because I think people are going to look at people are going to look up Anita Garibaldi and they're going to see that she was in the Ragamuffin War and they're going to be like, what is this?
Mean? It sounds like something out of Charles Dickens. Yeah.
These ragamuffins.
Yes. So yes, give us context. Yes.
Okay. So the furthest southern state in Brazil is called Rio Grande do Sul. It means the big river in the south. It's the furthest state south in Brazil. It borders Uruguay and Argentina. And the people from this area are a little different than the people from the rest of Brazil. They call themselves gauchos. It's kind of, think like what we think about when we think about cowboys in the Old West, right?
Okay, so these are cowboys of South America.
Yeah. They dress in these ponchos with the big hats. Mm-hmm. They have these kind of fringe, like shirts with fringe on them, like you'd see in the Old West. And they have that whole vibe of they're horsemen, they're cattle ranchers, they are independent people, they live. There's some mountains down there, but there's also some herding lands, and it's a kind of a different vibe from when you think about northern Brazil. It's a totally different setup. It's not cowboys down there or up there. Okay, so in the time period we're talking about right now is 1824. That's kind of when when this story is gonna begin. Now, at this point in time, there is a constitution of Brazil that says Brazil is a federation of states, but there's an emperor of Brazil.
Oh, Brazil had an empire.
Brazil had two emperors. They're both named Pedro. And in 1824, we're on Pedro II. There's a whole thing with this that is interesting, but it's just going to derail our conversation. We're just going to say that right now.
Y'all can Google it on your own time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, in 1824, Pedro II is the emperor of Brazil. And for a place like Rio Grande do Sul, which is so different from the rest of Brazil, they're not that interested in a federated empire, right? They liked each state having a little bit of its own autonomy.
Yeah, they'd rather be left alone to do their thing and, live and let live.
Exactly. And there's some interference going on with Pedro II. Pedro II's not like he's provides some stability, but the government is having a hard time. So the people of Rio Grande do Sul think that maybe he's not doing enough to take care of them. And these kind of seeds of revolution begin, like separatism begin in the state. Hey, we're different from everybody else. We're actually, like, there's a lot of similarities between the gauchos of southern Brazil and the gauchos of Argentina and Uruguay. And like, they feel a little bit more kinship with them than they do with Emperor Dom Pedro in Rio de Janeiro, right?
Yeah. And Brazil is just this abstract concept for a lot of the people, I would imagine.
Yeah, a little bit. They were still Portugal not that long ago. And so, they call it the Ragamuffin War, which is really just a silly kind of sounding name.
Is this a translation of some Brazilian Portuguese term?
It is, yeah. So in Brazil, it's called the Revolução Farroupilha. Farroupilha is like rags, like
Farroupilha,
like a piece of clothing that has been ripped to shreds. Is Farroupilha.
Like the sort of thing that a ragamuffin would wear.
Right,
like
yeah.
Rags.
Yeah, it was a word that was originally come up with to make fun of these gauchos because they have the fringe on their thing. They dress kind of they're not finely dressed like you'd see in Sao Paulo or Rio de Janeiro.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I just want to say crafting a poncho, weaving a poncho probably takes a lot of skill. So
yes.
It seems like this is an opportunistic insult. And,
yes.
Yeah.
And it's one that the people of this region kind of got around. Like they started calling themselves Farroupilha because they liked it. They were like, yeah, well, whatever. We're the scroungy guys and,
we're owning it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
they called the Federalists, they called them karamuru, or they called them camels sometimes. And that was like
camels.
Karamuru was a word they used to make fun of them for being too European. You're basically Portuguese. Like, we're the real Brazilians. You guys are these uptight, centralized, whatever. So they would make fun of each other with these words.
Okay, so we're just like shouting insults at one another, and the farrapos are appropriating it, claiming it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, which seems like it's vibing with the general ethos that you've been describing.
Yeah, exactly. And so those are the kind of the battle lines here. And, while they call it the Ragamuffin War, it's a beef jerky war.
Wait. Okay, so we went from ragamuffin to beef jerky in 60 seconds.
It's kind of the beef jerky war because here's the deal: is that these gauchos, they make it. They make a lot of jerky, a lot of leather products down there. The word for jerky in Portuguese, they call it charqui, which is where the word jerky comes from.
I always wondered that.
Yeah, charqui.
Yeah.
And while we're all supposed to be this centralized empire, the government, which at the time was in Rio de Janeiro, like they had these really low taxes on imported Argentinian and Uruguayan beef jerky and leather products. And so because it was a little bit cheaper to buy from Argentina, people were buying there. And now all of these farmers and all of these cattle guys and these ranch hands in Rio Grande do Sul, they can't make a living because they can't sell their stuff. They're selling it as cheaply as they can, but the Argentinians are still selling. No. And they're like, well, what are we even doing here then? Like, why you're imposing your stuff on us and you're not helping us at all. So we're just going to, there's some grumblings for let's separate, right? We'll do our own thing. We'll break apart. Maybe we'll be allies with Uruguay and Argentina and we can all do our thing. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So that's where they're coming from.
Yeah. So Emperor Dom Pedro, he doesn't like that. And he puts a governor in charge in Rio Grande do Sul that just starts he's starting to search out who is a separatist and who's not. He's starting to compile a list.
Yeah, because of course you do.
The separatists are like, okay, well, this is our chance. The guy who ends up being the separatist leader, his name gets mentioned in a speech by the new governor of Rio Grande do Sul, and that guy's like, okay, well, we can either act now or we're all going to go to jail anyway. So, okay, they decide to act. Mm-hmm. They get a group of maybe around 100 people. Only about 30 of them are armed and on horseback on September 19th, 1835, when there's a battle outside. I mean, it's a small battle. It's a little skirmish outside of Porto Alegre, which is the capital of the state. And so there's this battle on this bridge. There's some loyalist guys there. There's some gauchos there. They're yelling. They're the loyalists are coming after the gauchos. The gauchos are trying to fight back. Gunshots come out and people start shooting. People start attacking with bayonets and spears. They're using spears here. It's 1836, but there's a spear. The commander of the loyalist force is wounded by a spear, and 2 of his men are killed. And when the commander of the loyalist force is stabbed with the spear, he drops his gun, takes off his helmet, throws it on the ground, falls off his horse, gets up, and just runs away screaming.
Wow.
And so all of his men lose their nerve and they leave too. So this is, and they run away.
Okay, so they psych themselves out. I mean, okay, getting a spear piercing yourself is going to be bad for morale.
Mm-hmm. But dropping your helmet and all of your weapons and running away is a bad look for...
Well, it's a bad look. On the other hand, maybe it's like, okay, we're going to cut our losses and get out of here. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, So the loyalists have experienced non-successfulness. Yeah,
it's a very small engagement. There's 30 people on each side, but the loyalists run. And this is kind of, I mean, I picture like a Lexington and Concord kind of situation where there weren't a lot of people on that battlefield, but like it was important. And the gauchos move into Porto Alegre and they take the city on September 20th, 1835. September 20th is still a state holiday in Rio Grande do Sul.
I bet, yeah.
And the state declares independence a year later. The empire is trying to send troops to counterattack and to retake the province, but it's far away. Like it's all the way on the southern tip of the
Brazil's
country.
A big place.
Mm-hmm. And the government's in kind of disarray, which is part of the reason why these guys want to separate in the first place. They're trying to break apart, and because the government can't take care of them. And then when they do break apart, the government's struggling to do anything about it.
Yeah.
So this begins the Guerra dos Farrapos, the Revolução Farroupilha.
The Ragamuffin War in English.
The Ragamuffin War, the Beef Jerky War.
The Beef Jerky War,
yes. It will last for 10 years and leave 3,000 people dead.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's kind of this romantic time period in Brazilian history because we're at the height of, we're in the 1800s. It's kind of this romantic time period for literature and art. And this is kind of a time period that, like how we view the Old West, right? We view the Old West as kind of with these romantic ideas, when in reality it was a bunch of, smelly guys shooting each other, right?
Well, both of these things can be true. There is this really gritty side that ended badly for some people. And also you have other people writing literature, achieving achievements. Yeah. There's a lot of Brazilian literature that is kind of written around this time too. And not to mention that it's contemporary with people like Victor Hugo, right? Oh yeah.
And Charles Dickens. So there's a lot of literature around this time, and we're going to get into how some of that comes into being.
The whole vibe.
Yes. So, okay. So now we've got the Beef Jerky War is in full effect. And this revolution, it's starting to spread, and it's starting to spread north to the next state north, which is called Santa Catarina. And this is the problem for the emperor. We don't want this revolution spreading, but it is spreading because Santa Catarina is also in the south. They have gauchos. They're a little bit more, if we have to pick sides, I think we're going to pick Rio Grande do Sul. And one of the people living in Santa Catarina is Anita Maria Jesus Ribeiro. This is our Anita Garibaldi.
Anita Maria Jesus Ribeiro. So, and can we call her Anita for short?
Yes.
Okay.
Anita was born August 30th, 1821. So as this rebellion is spreading to her hometown, she's a teenager.
Prime risk-taking phase of one's life.
Yes, exactly. She lost her father a long time ago. Her mother is suffering from depression, probably because of that. And Anita but that puts her in a position where she needs to be a little bit more adult. She needs to kind of take charge of things. So she's a horseback rider. She's a gaucho. She can shoot, she can ride, she can drive cattle. She can work the farm. She can do all the cowgirl stuff. She's,
Yeah.
I'm getting like Annie Oakley vibes when I think about,
Oh, yeah.
even down to the like troubled childhood. She's from a town. Well, there's some debate on what town she's from. A lot of towns nearby like to claim her, but I'm gonna go with Tubarão, which means shark, but it's close to the coast in.
So she's
from Sharktown.
I'm from the town of Shark.
Yes.
Tubarão. Okay, awesome.
Yes.
Okay, so this is Anita, and she has badass vibes.
She has badass vibes. She's like a badass, like high energy 18-year-old, and when word of this revolution starting to show up, and she's in, she thinks it's awesome, super on board. This is excitement, right? Like, this is good. Like, this is going to be an opportunity for some excitement. So Luke Skywalker.
Gives her a purpose in life.
Yeah.
This is not just random risk taking. This is risk taking in accordance with some ideals.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And so she wants to be a part of this, and she gets a very good opportunity to be right in the middle of it. In 1836, that is the year that Giuseppe Garibaldi arrives in town. And Giuseppe Garibaldi, we've talked about him in the open. He's a big deal, Pat.
Okay, so he's made his way across the Atlantic Ocean, which in and of itself is kind of a big deal because, In
1834, that was not like a guarantee that you would make it all the way to the other side of the ocean.
Yeah, you don't just hop on a plane and get disappointing in-flight meals.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this guy shows up. And so Giuseppe Garibaldi, tell us about him.
So Giuseppe Garibaldi, he was born in a town called Nice, which is in present-day France. But at the time, in 1807, when he was born, it was French and Italian. They were kind of going back and forth. So he is...
Hashtag European history.
Right, exactly. He's of Genoan descent, I guess.
Okay.
But this is a time... And it's easy to think of Italy as being a country, right? It was a country during the Roman Empire, and it is a country now, but...
and geographically, it's a peninsula with a very distinctive shape. It's a boot, But at this time, Italy was just a geographical term. It was not a political thing. You've got Genoa, you've got Sicily, which is actually not entirely unified. You've got Florence, you've got Sardinia, you've got the Papal States, you've got Naples, you've got Venice, you've got Tuscany, you've got Lombardy, yada, yada, yada.
Yes,
and so
exactly.
Italy, it's like, it's just this whole...
It's just a mess of states. Kind of like Germany was like that too, right? Just a bunch of different, and they have different languages. Like the Venetians had a totally different language. They didn't speak like Italian as we know it, right?
Yeah. Like I was told by an Italian tour director of a trip that I took some students on that the reason... Okay, so one of the stereotypes of Italians is that they use hand gestures a lot when they speak. Our tour director said that his explanation was that, well, historically, you have so many different cultures in Italy. And politically, Italy was divided for so long, and you have so many different dialects that you have to use the hand gestures to communicate because the words might not match up.
That's really interesting. Yeah, because even if they were speaking Italian, even if a couple of these states were speaking Italian, or two different people
different
speaking
things
Italian,
in different places.
But you have these dialects, these accents that were so strong you couldn't understand each other. Like, dialect is almost a different language, right? Yeah.
Anyway, so you've got all of these different subcultures, all these different nations, all these different city-states,
so Garibaldi Garibaldi's an interesting character. We could do a whole thing on him, but...
totally, yeah.
But we're going to focus on him as he relates to Anita for this story. What he wanted to do was unify Italy under one banner. It was all these different little states, and he was hoping to recreate an Italian state for the people of Italy. He gets involved in some revolutionary movements that are trying to do that. In 1834, he participates in a mutiny to overthrow the government of Piedmont.
Which is in the north of Italy. Yeah.
Right. And he wants to overthrow the government of Piedmont, wants to create an Italian government. That doesn't work for Austria, who shares a border with Piedmont. And, the last time we had a unified Italy, we had the Roman Empire. And neither France nor Austro-Hungarian Empire, none of these guys, the Germans, nobody really wants Italy to be a unified dominant power in Europe. So it is in their best interest to keep Italy down, which is what Austria does. They attack this revolution in Piedmont. Garibaldi and his guys lose. Garibaldi is personally sentenced to death in absentia by Austria, so he runs away.
Okay, yeah. I don't blame him.
Yeah, you get two options: get hanged or flee to Tunisia, which is what he does. He runs to Carthage.
Yeah, goes to Tunisia, which is the part of North Africa that's geographically closest to Italy. So it's a convenient place to flee to. And also, Ben, you said Carthage, which is in Roman Empire terms, the historical symbolic enemy of Rome. So I don't know, he gets points for style.
Yes. So he leaves. He goes in 1836, he sails across the Atlantic to Rio de Janeiro. And he's kind of just looking for something different. He had been a ship captain before, so he's a good sailor. He gets on the ship, he goes to Rio, and when he's in Rio, he starts reading about this revolution in the south of the country, these Farroupilhas, the gauchos. And Garibaldi is the kind of guy who, like, this sounds awesome. Yes, revolution. We're going to overthrow the empire. These are freedom fighters looking to like battle this tyrannical government, create their own culture. Like, I'm super down. So he goes out of his way to find some of the guys, some people who are involved with the revolution. Rio's a big place. It's the capital of Brazil. There's an opportunity to find people there who maybe can help you. And he does eventually end up meeting the leader of the revolution. And he's like, hey, I'm from Italy. I'm a ship captain. Like, how can I help? I'm a revolutionary. I want to fight.
I have a resume.
Yes.
Check out my LinkedIn profile.
Exactly. Have participated in a mutiny in Piedmont, have fought the Austrian army. Do you need help with the Brazilians?
He's got bullet points, actually maybe literally bullet points.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Giuseppe Garibaldi gets a letter of marque to serve as a corsair, like a privateer.
What's a letter of marque? Is that like an official thing?
Yeah. So, okay, a letter of marque, usually we'll see this in reference to like the pirates of the 1700s, the Pirates of the Caribbean kind of thing. For instance, like if you were a private ship captain and you were British, you could get a letter of marque from the British government that said, it's okay if you want to like plunder and raid French shipping because we're at war with them. So you're kind of like a government-sponsored pirate. Okay. So the letter he got here was like, you can attack imperial shipping, and we won't, and that's okay. Like you're allowed to. But you can't, like, because we're at war with them. If situation changes, they can pull the letter of marque. It's a conditional thing. Like if you attack our stuff, you're going to go to, we're going to hunt you down. If you attack somebody that we're not at war with and accidentally put us in a war with somebody else, we're going to hunt you down.
Yeah. Okay, but it's like a stress valve, like a release valve?
Yeah.
Kind of like,
yeah.
Okay,
it's like
yeah.
you
if
are
you need to
allowed...
get your plundering out, okay, you can plunder. Here's a list of folks you can plunder.
Yeah. You're like a mercenary, but they're not going to pay you. You can plunder, you can do whatever you want to these.
Yeah, but if you're plundering, presumably you're going to get something out of the deal anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we're not, you're pirating for us. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
So he gets this letter of marque. That's great. I mean, here's the problem with the gauchos. They don't have a port. They don't have access to the sea. They don't have any big cities. They don't have any shipbuilding facilities.
Okay. So his maritime resume is irrelevant?
Yes. He now has a letter where he can raid Brazilian shipping, but he has no boats and he has no access to water. He heads south to Rio Grande do Sul. He catches a boat down there. And he goes out into the countryside of the state and he starts recruiting people to help him. And what he ends up doing is building two boats on land, like in like farmland. He builds two shipbuilding boats. Okay, like way
in the middle of the continent.
Yes.
Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay.
Brings like shipbuilding people out there because he has no access to the water. The entire coast is owned by the empire. So he builds an 18-ton warship and a 14-ton warship. And he puts them on wheels and they're dragged by 200 oxen to the sea so that he can put them in the ocean and pirate with them.
Okay, let's just stop for a moment and visualize this.
Yeah.
So
They reenact this in Brazil. Like you'll see like in parades and stuff.
Really?
Like yeah, in Rio Grande do
Oh,
Sul
wow.
for the anniversary of this kind of stuff. Like they're little boats, but like they'll build boats and put them on wheels. And guys, Garibaldi famously always dressed his guys in red shirts. It was the story is that it was cheaper to buy red shirts than to buy white ones.
I heard a story that it was like leftovers from some butcher's shops or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Butchers in the time period wore red shirts because of the blood.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And so, but there was like they had a bunch of red shirts laying around, and he was like, I'll just dress all my guys in that. And so you'll always see Garibaldi and his guys in red shirts. But guys, and we'll wear that, and they'll drag, they'll strap a regular size rowboat to 2 horses, and they'll drag it down the street for a parade and stuff.
Okay, so the 2 horses are representing like 200 oxen.
Right, 1 horse represents 100 oxen. These are big boats. Like this is like a pirate ship, right? This is not a small.
This is huge.
Yes, there are paintings of this. It's crazy looking.
Yeah. Like this is not like a kayak that you can portage with 1 or 2 people. This is like this is huge.
Build a thing like the Trojan horse kind of style, right? Like to build wheels for this.
Okay, so they're schlepping this over land.
And they arrive,
and this is land that is not immediately proximate to the seashore.
Right, because the empire owns the seashore, and if they see you building this thing off the coast, they're going to come get you, right? Like you got to build it far enough away that they don't know what you're doing. You got to build it in secret, drag it out there, stick it in the water, and then start attacking people.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, this is just like an educational project for like our middle school students. No,
just working on
it's huge. Okay, so it's like what did you say? 18 tons?
18 tons and 14 tons, like with crews of like dozens of people, right? Like that's the size of this ship, like a pirate ship. Like it's a warship. And so he builds these 2 ships, and he drags them across Santa Catarina to the town of Laguna. And he arrives there on July 22nd, 1839. He gets to the shore. He's got the boats. He's trying to find a spot to put the boats in the water. And he's up on this hill, and he's got this spyglass, like you'd see on a pirate boat or something.
Yeah. So he's telescoping it out. He's surveying the horizon. Yeah.
He scopes out the horizon. He scopes out the bay. He scopes out where, if there's enemy around, if there's any enemy ships in the harbor, where would I put mine in? Where they'll And so he's looking around, and the story goes that as he's scouting out the city, he sees a girl walking around town.
Wait, okay. So he's just like, let's linger on the visuals here. We've got this round lens, and I don't know if they had the crosshairs in those days, but anyway,
let's imagine it.
And he's just like, hey, she's
exactly
cute.
That is exactly what happened. He's Italian, man. This is how they work.
Okay, like this is like peak cliche.
Yes, you would roll your eyes if you saw this in a movie. But like I'm picturing it like a cartoon, like in the cartoons where like you go past it and you're like go back, and then like the eyes like pop out the far side of the telescope. Like that's kind of the visual I have of this in my head. But he's looking around, he sees her, he's like, whoa, she's cute.
Now Giuseppe Garibaldi was thinking strategically. He's thinking like, okay, boats,
town defenses, guards, entry points, like all of this stuff. And then
all of a sudden, ooh la la, or whatever the Italian/Portuguese version is. Okay, he was not expecting this, but apparently it happened. Okay, meet cute, or at least a unidirectional meet cute.
Yes.
Oh, she's interesting.
Yes.
Okay, what happens?
And so he scouts out the town, and there's no imperial presence in the town. So what he does is he drags his 2 boats up, and he puts them in the water there, and he moves his guys in, and he's like, all right, well, the revolution now controls this town. Okay. And people come out to meet him because this is weird. He's showing up with these 2 boats. He's going to put them in the water. People in Santa Catarina, they're like, they're a little confused by what's going on. They're mostly sympathetic to the revolution here. There's no imperial guys around. Cool. Great. We move in, we'll put these boats in the water, and the people of town come up. And I'm going to read a quote from Garibaldi here as he's entering the town with these boats. And you'll have to excuse me because The version I'm using for this quote is Garibaldi's writings translated by a Portuguese speaker into Portuguese, which I have then attempted to translate back by myself. So I'm not sure it's completely accurate, and I'm not sure it's exactly what Garibaldi said, but I will do my best.
We're going on vibes here.
Yes, this is a translation of a translation, but here we go.
Yeah.
He says, "We entered, and the first person who approached was the one I had seen through the spyglass. It was Anita, the future mother of my children, my life's companion, the good and happy and unhappy fortune of my life, the woman whose courage would ignite my life. We stopped and stared at each other, looking at each other as people who had seen each other in various previous incarnations. We searched for memories of where we had known each other. I saluted her and I said, 'I must have you.' I spoke very little Portuguese and articulated the provocative words in Italian."
Wow.
Yeah. He's 32 years old. She's 18. But this is normal for this. That's like pretty normal for this time period, right?
Okay. And in 18 whatever. Yeah. So what does she do? Does she say humph and walk off in a huff?
She doesn't fall, she doesn't, swoon for his Italian. She says, "I'm married." Uh-oh.
Which is a statement of fact.
Yes.
So she was married.
She had been married to a shoemaker since she was 14 years old.
Yeah, because I was going to say, if she's 18 and she's married, well, okay, yeah.
By most accounts, this was not like a very happy marriage either.
Oh, yeah.
So she, of course, ditches that guy, falls in love with Giuseppe Garibaldi, runs off to leave her hometown of like boring living with a shoemaker, nothing happening here. She's getting an opportunity to ride horses and shoot guns and fight in a war and
for a cause.
Yes, help her country be free, her people be free. She gets a red shirt and she joins the army of Giuseppe Garibaldi.
Okay.
I want to kind of illustrate what she's deciding with this. So I'm going to use a quote from Giuseppe Garibaldi, and it's interesting because when you read about her in Portuguese, they talk about Giuseppe Garibaldi is just Garibaldi, and she's just Anita. Like, in Brazilian sports, it's like that too, where you just go by your first name. They don't really call them by their last name.
Convention. Yeah.
So
like Ronaldinho.
Exactly, right? His name is Little Ronald.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Giuseppe Garibaldi is talking to, later in life, he's talking to guys who are going to follow him into war. And they're going to fight for Italian independence. They're going to try to reunify. He's not done with his dreams of unifying Italy. He's going to come back to that. Later in life, he's talking to his guys. But I think this quote also sums up what he's asking of Anita when she leaves her hometown to follow him into war. He says, "I offer neither pay, nor quarters, nor food. I offer only hunger, thirst, forced marches, battles, and death. Let him who loves his country with his heart and not merely his lips follow me." And I kind of get that vibe with Anita. She could have stayed home and had a boring life, and that would have been fine.
Yeah.
But
in some parallel universe, that is not this.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
She decides she's going to go with him. And this is the kind of guy.
She's going for the hunger. She's going for the thirst.
And this is the kind of guy that Giuseppe was too, right? He inspired this kind of attitude in people. He was a true believer in all of this. He was very charismatic. He was very devoted to his causes. Like, he's willing to fight and die for the independence of this state in Brazil that he'd never heard of 5 years ago. But he's very passionate about it. And that's kind of how their romance is and the way they wrote about it and the way it is portrayed in Brazilian telenovelas. It's very passionate.
Yeah. And if you're the subject of a Brazilian telenovela, you've arrived.
You made it. Yeah. With most of our European heroes, they get the erotic fanfic version from the 19th century, and for the great Brazilian heroes, they get telenovelas.
Yeah. Okay.
So she joins the army with him, and she will never leave his side again for the rest of her life. She will fight beside him in every major battle that they're going to participate in. She is like she's a frontline soldier in his army, and she will fight with him. So they take Laguna. There was no imperial presence there. It shows up when they find out that the rebels are there, putting boats in the water.
After the fact.
Yeah, exactly. They show up, and they have to have a battle. So the Battle of Imbituba is just the other, like, Laguna is the southern part of the beach, and the northern part of the beach is called Imbituba. They're very close to each other, and the Brazilian Navy sends warships. And he has to fight them with his warships and with cannons that he's brought over to the beach. So now he controls the beach, so that gives him an advantage if he can shoot from the coast at the Brazilian warships. There's a battle. During the battle, Anita is on Garibaldi's flagship. They're fighting. At one point, there is a cannon shot that blows up a big part of the side of the ship they're on. She falls into a pile of 3 dead guys.
Whoa.
And Garibaldi's like, "Are you good?" And she's like, no, I'm good. Like, you do your thing. I'll do my thing. She was carrying a sword. She was rallying people in the battle. She's carrying ammunition to the cannons. And the rebels win that battle, and they drive off the Brazilian Navy. And from that point on, they can start building boats on the shore. And Garibaldi starts... Yeah, and so the Garibaldis, they start building a fleet, and they start raiding shipping and doing what they had got that letter of marque to do. They end up taking 14 Brazilian ships during the course of their career here. And
wow, 14.
14, yeah. And because of the successes that they're taking, the revolution begins to get swept up in Santa Catarina. And we've had the Republic of Rio Grande do Sul. And then Santa Catarina declares independence in July of 1839. They declare the Juliana Republica for the, it's the Juliana Republica, because it was created in July.
Okay. And, like the July Republic.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
And so now the revolution's spreading, like you said. And Anita and Giuseppe are fighting in battles on the ground. Their military is mostly foot soldiers, but there is cavalry, and they're almost always mounted because they're the commanders of the unit. Giuseppe writes about her at one point. He says she was an amalgam of 2 elemental forces: the strength and courage of a man and the charm and tenderness of a woman, manifested by the daring and vigor of which she brandished her sword, and the beautiful oval of her face that trimmed the softness of her extraordinary eyes. And so this is a good...
Oh, dude is in love.
Dude is in love, yeah. She's killing people with a sword, and he's just like, got "Can You Feel the Love Tonight" going on his head while he's watching it, you know?
Yeah. Okay.
The revolution is spreading. That's bad for the Brazilian Empire. They regroup. They launch a big attack, and they drive the rebels out of Santa Catarina. There's fighting. Anita and Giuseppe are fighting guerrilla fights, but they're outnumbered pretty badly. They get pushed out of Santa Catarina. They have one more kind of big attempt to kind of reassert the revolution. And it happens in 1840. The Garibaldis are part of a much larger revolutionary...
Okay, so Ben, you say the Garibaldis, are they married at this point? Or are you just saying that it's like
married
a
to that
term
other
of
guy.
convenience?
Yeah, so she's still married to the other guy. They are not... They're a couple, but they're not... They will be married, but they are not yet.
So they're like Janita or Anisepi or... Okay. So they're very much a couple. They're very much an item.
Yes. So, I mean, for instance, at the Battle of the Curitibanos in 1840, she is pregnant. So they're an item.
Okay. Yeah. And so she's pregnant. So she's dealing with that on top of all the other, like, soldiering stuff, riding into battle, yada, yada, yada.
Right. Just hiking, camping, sleeping outside, living in a tent, right? And
staying active.
Very little food, very little water. You're on the run from the empire because you can't really fight them head on. But eventually there assembles a large force of revolutionaries, and they're going to have this kind of climactic battle against the empire at the Battle of Curitibanos. And Curitiba, And Curitiba is the town that my family's from. So that's the city that my in-laws are all from. So it's like right there. There's this huge battle in 1840, and Anita Ribeiro is fighting, and she's pregnant. She's in the unit with Giuseppe Garibaldi, but there's a lot of confusion in combat, and there's a cavalry charge. And at some point in the charge, she is knocked from her horse and she's captured.
Knocked from her horse?
Mm-hmm.
While pregnant?
Yes. I don't know how pregnant. I'm not entirely sure how far. But
she's okay. But like the stakes, like on multiple fronts, the stakes are high.
Yes.
Oh,
she is, the pregnant consort of the enemy cavalry commander. But she's captured, and the Imperial soldiers have her, and they bring her back to their camp.
Oh, wow. And these are the guys she was hoping to defeat.
Yes. So she's a prisoner. She's a prisoner of the enemy. She's a prisoner of war of the enemy. She's not wounded, but she is captured. And they tell her that Giuseppe Garibaldi is dead. He was killed in action.
They tell her.
Yes. Okay.
Now, you say they tell her.
Mm-hmm.
And, okay, so I know that sometimes when I watch a show and one of the characters is reported dead, I like to think I'm a sophisticated TV viewer, and I'm like, okay, do we have proof that that character is dead?
If you're a sophisticated TV viewer, you'll know that you can watch that character be horribly mutilated and die, and that still doesn't mean they're not coming back.
Yeah, depending on the type of show. Yeah. Now,
everybody's ever really dead.
Yeah. Now, this is Anita. So she lived before the invention of television, so she was not privy to these conventions. So these people who are like torturing her and just being awful.
They didn't torture her, so we can say this for them. This is
but like emotionally, they were trying.
This is Brazil.
This
is Brazilian prisoner of war. So this is kind of Max Brazil prisoner of war. She was sitting at the campfire with these guys, and they were like drinking. She's not in like a Guantanamo. She's like sitting there on the log with these guys, and they're drinking after the battle, talking about the battle, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, sorry, I think your husband's dead."
And she's trying to figure out like, okay, do I like play along to be polite, or like do I take a swig from the bottle, or
Yeah. Well, she doesn't believe it, right? Because she thinks that there would have been a bigger news or bigger deal if he had been killed. They would have paraded him around or something. It would have been something bigger than him just being like, "Oh, I think he was killed." So she's
pretty savvy.
Yeah, but what she says to them is, "Hey, do you mind if I go look? Do you mind if I go check the battlefield, see if I can find him? If I can find him, I'd like to bury him." And these guys are like, "Yeah, sure, whatever."
I mean, you can't argue with that, right?
Yeah. So they let her go walk the battlefield to find him. And she walks around a little bit and she doesn't find him. I'm sure somebody's watching her while she's doing this. They don't just let her off to go, but they take her around and she doesn't see him. And they're like, "Well, I don't know what happened, but like he's dead." That's what we heard. And they come back to the camp and she's like, "No, I don't think he's dead." So what does she do? She's in their camp. She's not tied up. She's not bound, but she is kind of in this tent with guards.
Yeah. And people watching her.
There's a strong implication that you were expected to stay here.
Yeah, with pointy objects or firearms to back this up.
Yes, we will probably shoot at you if you run away, but we're not going to tie you to a post or something, put you in a cage or whatever. Pat, do you think Anita Garibaldi or Anita Ribeiro is the kind of person that would sit in her tent and wait to hear back whether her husband's dead or not? She doesn't think he is.
I don't think Anita Ribeiro is going to just sit around. I think, if she sits around, it's to give herself a few seconds to think up a plan. And the plan would involve getting out of there, looking for Giuseppe. Yeah. Yeah.
She jumps on a horse. She steals a horse from the guys, takes off running into the night on horseback. And she gets a solid 100 meters or so before they start shooting at her.
Okay.
And we are going to take a very quick commercial break and finish this story, but we're going to leave it here for right now, where Anita Ribeiro freedom fighter, 18-year-old freedom fighter, veteran of multiple battles, is galloping off into the night with Brazilian soldiers, imperial soldiers shooting at her and raising an alarm and riding for their horses. We will be right back after this.
Okay. Ride, Anita, ride.
Okay, welcome back. So Anita Garibaldi, or Anita Ribeiro at this point, she is on horseback. She is riding. She's not severely injured, but she has survived this battle. She did fall off her horse. She's riding, and the Imperial soldiers are shooting at her. There's bullets whipping past her head. She doesn't really know where she is or where she's going, but she's just trying to get away from her captors so that she can regroup with the rebels, find Giuseppe Garibaldi, and get away from these guys. So.
Yeah. And also, she's pregnant, right?
She's pregnant. Yeah, that's the other thing.
So that's a thing.
Yeah. Adds a degree of difficulty. At first, she gets a pretty good distance, but then the Brazilian army gets on their horses and they start pursuing her on horseback. And they're still shooting at her. And at one point, she's riding, and there's a gunshot, and the horse underneath her starts to go limp. It's been hit.
Ooh.
And the horse goes down and dumps her off at a full gallop. She hits the deck. She's hurt, but she can still move. So she pulls herself out from under the horse and she starts running. And the Imperial troops are closing on her. It's dark, it's nighttime. They're closing on her and she's looking for anything she can do. She runs, she hears the sounds of running water. And it's a river nearby, a big river, like fast-moving waters.
Okay,
and
So you can't just wade across it.
You can't wade across it. So she runs, and the Brazilian troops are closing on her rapidly. There's nowhere else to go. She jumps in the river and starts swimming. The Brazilian troops, they get off. I don't know if they didn't have bullets in their guns or if they shot at her or not, but this is kind of one of these slow reloading, like a musket or like a rifled musket kind of deal. And it would have taken them a long time to reload if they even had a bullet still in the thing. So maybe they shoot at her, maybe they don't. But either way, this is a fast-moving river, and she's getting pulled downstream very rapidly.
Ooh.
These guys are looking around. There's nowhere to go. Like they can't follow the river because there's too much forest around. And they just decide, you know what? She's not going to make that. Pregnant lady, not wearing a coat.
River, big current.
Fell off a horse, right? Like this is it.
Yeah.
Except she doesn't die. She gets the other side of that river.
This is Anita.
Yes, Anita Ribeiro. She doesn't die. She gets the other side of the river, and she spends the next 4 days on foot, wandering through the forest, looking for help.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 4 days. No food, no water, no nothing, trying to scavenge for everything. She eventually, at the end of those 4 days, comes across a farmhouse where people there. They take her in, they help her, and they get her in contact with the resistance. And turns out Giuseppe Garibaldi is still alive, and he's there, and he's very, very happy to see her.
Aha! So her instinct or her excuse was valid.
Yes. Yeah, he's there, and he's alive, and they're back together again. So Anita is reunited with Giuseppe Garibaldi. He is alive, and now she is too. She suffered greatly wandering through the forest for 4 days. She was shot at. She survived the battle. He probably thought she was dead in battle, right? If he didn't see her again. But she's back there, and she lives, and the baby survives also.
Oh,
so
good.
A few months after this escape, she gives birth to Domenico Minotti Garibaldi. Okay, great. Happiness, right? She and Giuseppe are in a little house together, a little resistance house. She's been put up there. She has this baby. They're staying there for the first couple weeks until the baby's a little bit older, where they can move him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, while they're staying at this house, somehow the Empire gets word that they're there. And when Minotti is 12 days old, less than 2 weeks, there is a word. There is a call from the tree line, and it is Imperial forces. The Brazilian Empire is here. They have found the Garibaldis. They have surrounded the house. It's Anita, it's 12-day-old baby boy, and it's Giuseppe. And
they're surrounded.
They're surrounded. She just gave birth 12 days ago. This, Pat, is the story of the statue that you saw in Rome.
Yeah.
With the baby in one hand and the gun in the other. And this is the story that we are going to have to tell in part 2 of this episode. Please stay tuned. Please tune back in because this is going to be a fun escape.
You want to find out what happens.
Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you on the next one.
Stay badass.
Badass of the Week is an iHeartRadio podcast produced by High Five Content. Executive producers are Andrew Jacobs, me, Pat Larish, and my co-host, Ben Thompson. Writing is by me and Ben. Story editing is by Ian Jacobs, Brandon Phibbs. Mixing and music and sound design is by Jude Brewer. Special thanks to Noel Brown at iHeart. Badass of the Week is based on the website badassoftheweek.com, where you can read all sorts of stories about other badasses. If you want to reach out with questions, ideas, you can email us at badasspodcast@badassoftheweek.com. If you like the podcast, subscribe, follow, listen, and tell your friends and your enemies if you want, as we'll be back next week with another one. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.